Welcome to another episode of the Hospitality Mentor Podcast. And today, I'm very excited to have Vanessa James, CEO and founder of VJ Media and Food, Wine, and Fete founder. Vanessa, welcome to the
Hi,
show.
Steve. The
Well,
one and only Steve Turk. I'm so excited to be on your podcast finally.
I'm excited to have you here. And the day that I have a professional voice actor and voiceover artist, my voice is terrible, not from partying, battling a cold, because I wasn't going to miss this with you
I
today.
was gonna say you were gonna I was hoping you were gonna tell me that you narrated some amazing documentary over the weekend or something.
No, I watched a bunch of them in bed, but not that I did that.
Okay.
But today is a little bit different. Usually we're all hospitality here, but I want to talk to you because you are in entertainment. You are a Renaissance woman. You've got so many different things going on. And we both went to Florida State at the
We
same
did.
time.
This
Yeah,
way.
you see, she's got the Seminole chop for everyone out there. And I was excited to bring you on because you've been to my events. Could not make it to this event that we're going to talk about because I was out of town and I'm going to be there next year. But I want to start
Sure.
at the beginning of how you got to become this person that is a business owner, a Renaissance. How did it all begin for you before you got to Florida State? When you were in high school, was it something that you envisioned this is what you wanted to do? Or were you a DJ and like doing parties and emceeing like I was doing like little kid parties and bar mitzvahs? Or were you
Oh,
doing something
wow.
else?
That's so exciting to know. No, I actually was going to be the next Robin Roberts, the Monday Night Football sportscaster. I loved football because my cousins, so when I immigrated here from Trinidad and from the USVI, which is where my roots are, my cousins were obsessed with football. So I had no choice but to watch it because I spent all my summers there and it was all boys and just me. So I became a Joe Montana, San Francisco 49ers fan very early in life, Jerry Rice fan, and then decided at that point, you know what? I just loved how Robin Roberts would storytell, right, from the sidelines, and
Mhm.
I'm like, "I wanna do that." So that's really what got me started in broadcast and entertainment in mass media in that whole flow, and discovering that, okay, I really like the way she really does play-by-plays from the sidelines, and she's in the game, but she's not in the game because obviously she couldn't play. So that kinda got me fascinated about the whole process, and it led me to Florida State after applying at some other places around the country, including Northwestern, and I just was, like, in Georgetown, and I said, "You know what? I'm gonna stay in the state," and decided to transition up, to Tallahassee, and then I fell in love with Florida State, and got in there and got into the Dean Deckerhoff, internship program and really learned about, sportscasting from him. Obviously, he's a legend in the game, and
Mhm.
then I was kinda just doing odd jobs, and I was working at a construction company. Holly Incorporated, just trying to get, these coins up so I could pursue this sportscasting career while I was getting, my degree, and I heard a commercial for a receptionist at a radio station. At that time, it was Clear Channel, which is now iHeartRadio. And I called and they were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I'm at lunch at this construction company. And they're like, "Are you available for an interview in the next hour?" And that's really how it started for me. I interviewed, I started off as the receptionist at a local radio station and then made friends with everybody. I'm pretty friendly
Yep.
and decided that, a program director at the time, Steve King, said, "Hey, come do these commercials for me. I need a spotter for these commercials." And it was sports commercials and also like an array of different things. And he goes, "You've got a great voice." And that's how it all kind of started. And he put me on the air. He put me on at 2 a.m. And that's where I got to make all my mistakes, and I actually had a little bit of a stutter, so I kinda broke my stutter there too, and I was like, "Okay, wait a minute, I'm talking to 1.4 million people, with this microphone. I like this." So
Yeah.
that's really got, my passion in terms of transitioning from sportscasting and still feeling like I was connected to it, but then, like, my entire love for music and all of that really kind of blossomed from there,
So what is
and
I want to rewind it here because
yeah.
you're working construction, you hear a
I'm not
job,
working construction.
or you're in
I'm
the
selling
construction,
balls.
you're answering. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're part of it. You're part of the industry
Yes.
there. You hear that there's a job working for 100.7 The Beat. Was that the right channel
100
that you were?
100.3, the beat.
100.3 The Beat. I
Actually,
forgot
you know what?
there.
I'm sorry, 100.7, you're right.
I thought it
100.3.
was.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, 100.3 is what I
I
voice now,
remember. So
so
2 AM,
yeah.
even though it might be late for many people here in college
Not
town, we were
Florida.
all awake.
Oh,
Yeah, we
yeah.
were all awake. So
We're
what was
all
it
awake.
like? What was it like for you like that? Do you remember the first time you actually, like, went live on air and it was like
I
you had to
I
speak?
I I I was a mess. I sweat through all of my clothes. I was terrified. It was just me in the studio and like, one audio engineer at the time that became like good friends that I'm still in connection with today. But I specifically remember there's this club called The Moon.
Yeah,
Do you remember The Moon?
I went to the moon.
Yeah, I went to The Moon too. And
I
I'd
definitely
be
try to buy you a drink probably at some point, Vanessa. I was saying that's what probably
definitely
happened.
catching people coming home from the moon, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh." So that's how things really got sparked. And then I was like, "Wait a minute." Well, like once you learn the technical aspects of it, and I think that's where all the nerves came from, because when the mic's on, like, all of a sudden, like, the pressure's on, you get nervous. But once you learn all the technicalities of it and you really learn to kinda just be yourself and realize I actually had a mentor tell me, "Just act like you're talking to a girlfriend, or just, like, act like you're talking to your cousin about sports, except now you're talking about music. Now you're talking about Usher and Rihanna and Beyonce." And that was easy because it felt more natural. And so that's when things kind of really, shifted for me. And I realized, wait a minute, I could just, be storytelling and really start to make some money talking to my friends across the city
Yeah.
about things I cared about.
So how does that business work? Because I don't know much about it. So back then, I'm sure it's changed a lot over
Oh
the
yeah.
years. But you're in Tallahassee, smaller market. You're on the radio to a lot of people. You're at the moon, where I actually saw Armando Perez Pitbull, Mr. 305 there when he was first
Yes.
coming out.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So when you're doing this, how do you make money? Is it just a salary, or is it because you're going to events? Is it
No, no, no.
because
It
how are you
definitely
doing it?
was it definitely was a salary job. At that time, I was so excited. I was making $23,000 a year, and I thought I was killing it.
Baller.
Yes, it was my first full-time job, and I remember John Hunt at the time, my former GM, was like, "Listen, we're gonna try this out, Vanessa. Here's what we can offer you." And I called my mom like, "Oh my gosh, they offered me 23K, mom." It was like 20, 21 years old. It was hu
Yeah.
I was it was huge for me. So, no, it was a salary job. In addition to that, I started to learn about endorsements and learn about all these little gigs that you could make on the side as well, live remote broadcasts, and that's when things started to really flourish. And I'm like, "Wait a minute." I think that's where my entrepreneurial hat came in as well. I'm like, "Okay, this is great, this base salary, but also I can do all these little satellite things and also make money as well." So, yeah.
Yeah. So
And
you
that
graduate.
23 transitioned to
uh,
48, transitioned to 56, and then I think I left, Tallahassee making, like, 52K, which was, like, unheard of for,
it's like yeah, it's like being a millionaire in Tallahassee.
it is.
So you're there, you graduate in 2001, and a lot of people are like, "All right, I graduated, it's time to move on," but you hang out for another 4 years.
I
Was
do.
that something that you, like, consciously made that decision? Like, "I like it here, I don't wanna leave," or did they convince you to stay after you graduated? How do you make that choice?
Well, by the time it was time for graduation, so I graduated, again, was working at the radio station, but then I started to, kind of dabble into the corporate end of things and started doing promotions and working in the promotions department. So I stayed for the job. I stayed because I got hired at the station to do
Mhm.
multiple things. And then I got hired as their first female program director for the beat at the time there. And
Wow.
that's when, again, things really I really started, I'd like to say, career wise in corporate radio, from the receptionist all the way up to the program director, first female program director in the market, which was a big deal at the time, especially of color. And then again, it just kind of flourished from there. But yeah,
I love it. So you're doing that, 2005 comes around, you make a big move down the state, and you
yes,
end up in Miami, but you're still, I think, with the same company, right? Like you mentioned, it was Clear Channel that became iHeart.
yeah.
How does that happen? How do you come down to Miami?
Well, you beg your VP of operations and you say, "Listen, I am ready to move." I was done with Tallahassee. At that time, I was post breakup, and I'm like, "I'm ready to get the heck out of here." I had bought a townhouse. I rented it. It rented fairly quickly because it was in a great area. And I just decided, "Okay, you know what? It's time to move." So I reach out to my VP at the time and I say, "Hey, listen, what's open at MIB?" Because that's everyone's dream, is to do what they're doing radio wise in a top 10 market, whether it be Chicago, Boston, LA, San Francisco, Miami, Atlanta. And I go, "I'm ready to move," because I had gotten offered, a few gigs in other places, but I said, "No, I don't want to go to Tupelo, Mississippi."
Mhm.
No, no hating on Tupelo. But at the end of the day, it was time for me to move back home because that's where I had a lot of roots, a lot of Caribbean roots. I was traveling a lot, visit my parents and friends that were still in South Florida. And then I just decided not to wait. So I actually left Clear Channel and then went to the Sun Sentinel for a little bit, and that
Oh,
was
wow.
pivotal as well. I was there for a little bit in their marketing department for about a year before I got the call about their openings at the, at the station here in South Florida that I proudly was the m marketing director, music director, and midday host for, which is 103.5 The Beat, which is still on the air today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
103.5, everyone knows it down here. So you're on
yeah,
air at a major market, right? So you make this pit stop. I think it's important because a lot of people don't realize, like, the people who listen to this are looking about how to improve their career. And you
sure.
made a move like, all right, it's time for me to go.
Yeah.
Sun Sentinel. Hey, I never
'Cause you
worked
know
at a
when you know.
newspaper.
You know when
Yeah.
you know you gotta go, right? It's time, like, you feel it, like, intuitively, I just knew it was time. It was Tallahassee can only provide you so much, especially if you're not in government or in sports there, right? So
Yep.
I decided that it was time, yeah.
So you make your move down here. You're in Miami. You're at one of the biggest stations in Miami. And that's still when there was not much streaming going on. Like you couldn't stream music. Like you had to like plug in a weird tape deck to hear like your music on just like your iPod at that
Yeah,
time, right?
yeah.
So everyone's still listening to you. What was that like when you come to a big city and people know your voice and know your name when you're in the city? How did that differentiate from Tallahassee?
Well, they didn't really know me here yet because I came down and I went to work at the Sun Sentinel, and that's where I started to dabble in not just editorial work and as an assistant to an incredible mentor there, Tim Sumption, but that's he threw me on camera as well. So a lot of stuff I just kind of got thrown into, right? And I just kind of went for it. I look back on my 20 years of career wise, and it just was a lot of gumption. Just like, okay, let me go for it and see what sticks.
Yeah.
But at the Sun Sentinel, I was doing a lot of their at that point, they were going digital, so they were starting to do some stuff with their .com, and they're like, "Hey, go stand over there and read this teleprompter script." And I was terrified, and, it's funny because prompter still to this day is one of the elements of, I would say, entertainment that I always continue to still polish and brush up on because I always feel like now I'm definitely in flow working at a network here, like, where I'm doing that often, but before it was, like, terrifying, so that's where I learned some editorial, stripes and got some prompter under my belt before transitioning back to radio. I got a call. It was happy hour, Fort Lauderdale, downtown Fort Lauderdale, and it was from Mata Melendez at the time, who was a program director there, and she's like, "Hey, I have a gig for you. Are you available again to meet?" And all of these radio opportunities are always like very kind of hush hush because a lot of times when they're hiring somebody, they're often transitioning from somebody else unless it's a brand new station that's launching. And they were doing a complete rehaul at that time, and she was like, "Hey, I've got multiple gigs for you. Would you be willing to take 3 jobs, not 1?" So I'm from the Caribbean and we love multiple jobs, which is not just a thing. I think it's something that we definitely feel like we're always wanting to overcompensate. Maybe it's a cultural thing. So I took all 3, which in hindsight I probably still would have, but I would have asked for way more money, right? Because I was so excited
Mhm.
about the gig, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh," at that time it was like 88K, which was the most money I had ever made. But in retrospect, I'm like, "Holy moly, did I undershoot my shot?" Right? So
Mhm.
promotions director, midday host, and music director before becoming the PD was a lot on my plate, and I did it and rocked it. But I was coming home at 10 o'clock at night every night and realize, you should be asking for more money. So that's one of the big things when people ask for mentorship from me, especially when they're starting off and they're still in the corporate world. How much do I ask for, especially as a woman, especially as a woman of color? You've got to know how to position yourself, especially if you know you're really good, to ask for what
Mhm.
it is that you think you deserve and how to negotiate. And to this day, I still feel like I could be a better negotiator.
I like that tip. So let's just say we were in that room,
Yeah.
right? And you were going back to that today, knowing what you know now. How would you have done that differently?
I think I would have done it differently by saying, I'll thank you for the opportunity. I will definitely get back to you, not just saying yes on the phone ever, right? No matter
Mhm.
how good the opportunity is, thinking about it and sleeping on it. And then removing the emotion from it and saying, like when I sit with myself and it's just me and I'm working 10 to 10, what is the value of that, right? Now, obviously, they, put a lot of, oh, you're going to get to do this. You're going to get to interview amazing people, Chris Brown, Usher, Rihanna, Mary J. Blige. That's great. But it also comes with you doing all the preparation for that, managing a staff of 6, staying till 10 o'clock at night for music logs for the next day. So it's a lot. And so it's talking to other people, finding other people in your community that can help you and guide you through what each one of those positions should really be going for, getting that overall number, which at that time was probably like about 125K. And then letting them know, listen, the value of all of this work is this much money. And also letting them know that you're knowledgeable about that is very important, right? So that you don't get
Mhm.
shorted. And then negotiating your way up to that number. So for me, I guess what I would have done different was exactly what I just said, but negotiated up to that number. So let's say they came back and said, okay, V, I've only got 106, right? Which is, I think, what I settled at the end, like years later, right? Before I finally exited corporate, I left at like 106.5, but I negotiated in paid, like extra paid vacations, an extra week of because I'm a huge carnival person, so an extra week to be able to go to Trinidad for carnival in the middle of February, which is
Mhm.
sweeps for us in Radio Land, and just negotiating other things in endorsement deals and things like that that I know could get me closer to the number that I wanted, right? For that value of all that work. So that's what I would say. Just sometimes it's not just money, sometimes it's peace of mind, sometimes it's bartered deals. Like for a lot of people in corporate, it's a corporate car where they pay the insurance, they pay for the car, they pay for the cell phone. All that cuts down on your monthly bills, right? So that's probably what I would have done different, just been a better negotiator
Gosh,
all
I love
around.
that. I love that for anyone negotiating anything right now, just rewind that last 2 minutes to really pick up a lot of tips in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
That's really good. I love that. So you're there, you're doing 103.5, you're doing 3 jobs.
Three jobs, Steve.
It's You're doing it for, in my notes here, 5 years, it looks
Yep.
like. When do you start getting this kinda like entrepreneurial mindset? Like, "All right, I've had enough of the corporate world because this is what we're gonna talk about as you transition." But, because scary for a lot of people. You've always had that paycheck, you've always had that going on. How did that start coming up?
For me, it kind of just got tossed my way because I started to notice that iHeart was going digital, and that's when they had launched iHeart before I left, right? So it had launched like not even 6 months prior. And I started to get feedback from other program directors because we talked to each other on conference calls every Friday at every Friday at noon. We'd spend lunch hour together. At that time it was Zoom, but prior to that it was, and now it's Zoom, but prior to that it was conference calls. We just get to hear each other.
Mhm.
And that was like what everybody looked forward to because we get to run things by each other and ask questions. But it's also where I built a lot of camaraderie with people in my business in other markets, right? So
Okay.
like obviously also those annual conferences and things like that. So in that, I building relationships, which is the heart of my business, is really touching bases with them and saying, "Hey, I started this freelance voiceover lane in addition to doing all this PD, and MD work and being on the air because I was getting a lot of opportunities here in South Florida to voice, things for different charities and car companies and like enterprises like that." So at the time, my mentor Doug Turkel was like, "Hey, V, come to my studio." This is after the conference call. "Come to my studio and voice this quick, like, headquarter Toyota clip for me," or something like that. "I need an extra voice." I said, "Okay." So I go there and he gives me the script and it takes me like 6 minutes to do it. It's like, but man, this sounds really good. He goes, "Okay, great. Send me an invoice. $150. I said, $150 for 6 minutes of time. He goes, "Yeah, that's exactly how much the client has for those particular lines." So that's exactly what happened. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Again, I'm
Hold
very
on.
entrepreneurial, like mindset in that way. And like very much thinking about side hustles because my parents are very much like, ingrained in you as immigrant parents, like you've got to make sure you've got your 401, but then you've got to have other streams of income and all of that. So it just kind of sparked from there. Okay, I love this voiceover thing, but also I can make extra money from it. So then I go, Doug, what's an invoice? I knew what invoices were, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to set up this LLC so I can
Yeah.
invoice this man aside from, VJ stuff. So that's when I started Vanessa James Media as a way to actually be able to legally send people invoices for all my freelance work. And that's really how it started. I specifically remember like starting my LLC, going to Sunbiz, getting all the articles of incorporation done. And also like, okay, what is this logo going to look like? And my graphic artist, Tamara at the time, she created this logo, which I'm still using because I still love it years
I
later.
love that. I love that. So when does the official like, "All right, I made it, I can make enough now, or I can leave," or was it like, "I am gonna go make enough, so I'm out of
Oh
here"?
no, it was a layoff, Steve. It was a
Oh,
layoff.
there you
Yes.
go. Full layoff.
Yeah, so 2000 Ju I specifically remember it was May 15th, 2010, and they're like, "Hey, Vanessa, unfortunately, at the time, the beat flipped. It flipped to like Latin contemporary. And they were like, we've got a great job lined up for you, though, in San Francisco. Lateral move, same exact positions, minus promotions. And you get to go over there, be on the air, and be there APMD. And it was that same money, right? And I'm like, hold on. But now 106 in San Francisco is a lot different than 106 in Miami, right? So I said,
Mhm.
no. I'm like, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I also, at that time, because I built so much camaraderie with different people in the industry, I knew whose job I would be taking if I took that job. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm
Yes.
like, no, it's okay. I'm good. I didn't take it. I started Vanessa James Media again that June. So a month later, I had started it, and I just started to lean on all of those people that I had been on those conference calls with. And I'd be like, hey, Rob Miller, who, so clients were also, I call them clients now, but at that time they were colleagues reaching out to me to voice their stations ahead of time. So I had left WMIB with 4 stations under my belt. I was already voicing. And it just kind of tumbled, kind of like took off from there in terms of just program directors talking to each other and go, "Oh, she's voicing my station and this is this market, this market, this market." So I left with my first station like on my own was KTU New York, which people are like, "That is crazy." But I launched my company with the number one market and the heritage station in that market. So yeah, kind
See,
of
so it was meant to be.
springboarded from there. Apparently it was meant to be.
So what were those, like, kind of first years like? Because look, as business owners, a lot of people
Tough.
don't get, like, you only eat what you kill. You gotta go hunt.
Yeah. You gotta go
And so if
hunt.
you're not hunting, you're not gonna be eating. So what was it
Yeah.
like for you? Because you didn't have a chance to ramp up, not
Mm-mm.
knowing that that layoff was gonna come. What was it
Yeah.
like when you had to ramp up quickly?
It was super tough, and I'm not gonna tell you that I ramped up quickly. I was, like, super in my professional grief, which I did a blog on that's still on my site to this day that people still always email me about because no one talks about professional grief, so meaning that, you had to lay off your staff and leave because you didn't take the other job. Now your phone that's going off, the hook because everybody thinks they have access to all this fun stuff that you get to give them all the time. Tickets to this, flyaways to here, floor seats for this. Now you don't have all that access. So now like your phone barely rings. So all of that was going on emotionally, plus
Yep.
dealing with, launching this new company. But I definitely go back to like the grit and gumption, which is clearly in me just as a person. I was like, okay, it's time to ish or get off the pot, right? And it just was time. And so I used the summer of 2010 to get all of my ducks in a row, so LLC, logo creation, and then I leaned on, like, what I do best, which is, like, intimate, just natural connection with people, and just reached out to I first of all, a mentor of mine, Sam at the time, her name's Baby Sam, she just was like, "Girl, you are always gonna be in demand because you treat people well." She would always tell me that. So people always remember how you treat them and how you do business. And so they don't forget that. So she just was like, go take a vacation, go to Paris, take a vacay, relax. I didn't go to Paris. I think I just went to like the Bahamas or something, and relax and then come back and recalibrate. So that vacation, that travel really helped me disconnect. And when I came back fresh. And so I came back and just put together like a blueprint. Okay, here's if I could work with, the top 10 people that I know right now, who would I email? Who would I call? And I started to cold pitch like that. And I was cold pitching program directors. I stuck in radio and said, "Hey, I'd love to voice your station. Here's my demo." So I had to get the demo ready, all those little things that you have to get like your kit ready before you can push it out to the world. And that's what I did. And I just kind of pushed it out to the world and saw what stuck. But then again, programmers were just starting to call and going, "Hey, V." And they knew me. So it was easy. They'd be like, "VJ, okay, this is what I got, boom, South Carolina, San Francisco, Boston." Like these are stations that are 12, 15 years old under my belt that I'm still voicing from a long time ago. And what happens is when one program director talks to another, they go, "Who's voicing that? Who is that? Who's that? Who's doing that for you at KT New York?" "Oh, okay, great. I want her. Send me her info." Boom, boom, boom. So that's kind of how it springboard from there. But that voiceover side hustle business quickly turned into like just my bread and butter, but it allowed me to have flexibility because you could bring your mic anywhere, right? So I'd
Yeah.
bring my mic and travel and start kind of leaning on all the other things that I learned how to do over my course from Florida State and transitioning down to Miami, which was editorial work, writing, all that type stuff. So all of that kind of falls under this media umbrella. That's VJ Media now, but that's really kind of where it kind of started with throwing spaghetti on the wall, just like a lot of entrepreneurs. seeing what
And
stuck.
I love this kind of stuff. This is all what I love, but it gets scary too. Like, look
Yeah.
at my voice today. Do you ever have this, like, where you gotta record
Oh,
something and you
oh,
can't get paid
200%.
because you sound like me?
Yeah, 200%. Well, because here's the thing, if you're doing it professionally, you learn how to stay away from that, and so what happens is I'm taking all the precautions daily, weekly to get to not, have horse, but if I do, I you just have to let clients know, like, this is not working today. It's your instrument. You have to take care of it. So, warm saltwater goggles, which I tell people all the time, do not underestimate the power of salt water because it cleans things out and it helps things kind of stay fluid. And then hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. And then lozenges and honey, all that stuff really does work.
All right, I'm getting on it. I have to give a speech in
Get
2
on it.
days. I
Do
have to
you?
give a speech, yeah,
Oh, I got you. I
a
got
two
you.
and a half
I'll
hour
send you the
talk
remedy.
to the Mandarin Oriental. I gotta get them pumped
Oh,
up.
big speech.
Yeah,
Gorgeous venue.
yeah,
Okay.
so I gotta get them fired up.
Gotta get you right.
But anyhow, I love this part of your journey. So you're in it. Now you're a business owner,
Yep.
which you've been doing for 14 years. You're
Yep.
building your business. When do you feel like, all right, it's usually never for me is this point, but where do you feel like, all right, I'm at this point where I'm good. Like I'm gonna continue being a business owner. I'm not going back to the corporate world.
When I started to okay, so I started off with 5 stations, so I was able to pay my rent and pay, like, the basics with that money, but again, I had savings, so I kind of, was
Supplementing.
allocating and reallocating. I think I realized when I wasn't gonna go back to corporate when I could stand on my own as an entrepreneur and make money, and then I was getting called when I started to get called for more things and started to learn how to properly negotiate my rate so that I'm like, "Wait a minute, okay, 5 stations," at that point, between 800 and $1,000 a month. It was enough to at least keep me afloat, and that transitioned to 32, right? So, again, I think that I think when I hit my 10th station, which was Boston, I go, "Okay, this is real now. Now I have to start investing back into it, which is buying new microphones, a professional studio, taking workshops, networking, going to conventions." That's when I started to really kinda, like, just get the cylinders moving, right?
I think it's so cool. So you start continuing to grow. You
Yeah,
start doing a lot of voiceovers for radio.
yeah,
You've been doing TV now too. Like I hear you
yeah,
on the CW. I just saw that out there. You've been doing a
yeah,
lot of different stations. You're doing basketball. You're
yeah.
doing a ton of things. So you're coming back to that Robin Roberts almost. You're not
I
on air, but you
am.
are on
Full
air,
circle. I can't
right?
wait to interview her one day. It's coming. I'm manifesting that.
It's going to. We're going to put it out there today. It's
Yeah.
going on the airwaves.
Okay.
So you're doing this, and then you start getting into some events here, right? You've been putting to, we talked a little bit about this, but I want you to kind of
Yeah.
tell me, how did events start coming into this world of yours?
So events start coming into this world when I actually was the music director for this event that used to be here in South Florida called Hispanicize. And so when I went to it's a 4-day conference. At that point, it was a US Latino trends conference in the country, the biggest. It's where brands came to connect with, at that point, influencers, which was just budding. 2013, 2014, the influencer world was just really getting, serious, where brands were like, okay, we need to start thinking about these people really seriously because they're moving the needle for us. And so going and kind of having a like a front row seat, but also getting to be backstage and see how everything was working. I'm like, wait a minute, there's a pocket missing here. Because what I realized in South Florida was, as multicultural as we are, we don't connect. Everyone stays in their own pockets and buckets, right? So it'll be, oh my gosh, you live in North Broward. Oh my gosh, that's so far from Kendall. I can't go all the way down there, that type of thing. So long story short, I decided, okay, I need to put something together where I can connect all the different people and get them out of their pockets in media, right? So photographers, television producers, writers, people in editorial from the newspaper world of mine, from radio, from TV, they need to be connecting. There needs to be, an opportunity for more inclusivity and for them to connect. So that's when I created my first event, which was very scary, VJ Media Mixology. I did my first one in 2012,
Oh,
and I can't believe it. I cannot believe that it's been since 2012 that I've been producing events. But yeah, and it was 200 people, and they were so excited to get out on a Thursday night and meet each other. And then that was the first time that, so I had, at that time I was working with Chevy, and I met them through Hispanicize, and they sponsored my event. They gave me $3,000 at the time to bring their cars and to activate with me. And I go, "Oh my gosh," So cocktails, it was Bombay Sapphire Gin, I'll never forget, my first sponsor, and Chevy. for their brand new Chevy. It was their Urban Drive series, and I got to be the person in the market to bring everybody together to celebrate over Bombay Sapphire cocktails and Chevy, and in like talk about media, but also connect on other things. And it's so exciting because that turned into 7 seasons of that. I'm bringing it back this year because it took a hiatus during the pandemic. But I love those type of events, like in terms of connection, because people connect with each other, and then they spring their own collaborations and connections from that, and that's what it's all about.
See, I love that you came to my first event that I did on my own
Yeah,
for the hospitality mentor, and that
absolutely.
meant the world to me because we didn't really know each other at that time, and I feel like I have known you for a long time, so it meant a
Yes,
lot
I've
that
been cheering you on, Steve.
we gotta give a shout out to our PR director,
We
Ceci
do, we
Serrato,
do, we do.
who's, put us together,
She
and she
has.
brought you over, so
Yeah,
if you're looking for a PR director, make sure to check out Ceci Serrato at
she's
CC
unavailable. She's booked.
Communications.
She's booked and busy. She's got 2 really, really demanding, clients. She doesn't have time.
One of the best. You see? I hope you hear this,
I
Ceci.
see that, yeah.
So you're going your events, and you talked about bringing something back.
Yeah,
You just brought back one of your successful events,
yeah.
and I wanna talk about this because it's Food, Wine, and Fete.
Yes.
Give us this 30-second download for people that don't know what this event is, and we'll talk about how you created it.
Sure. So 30 seconds. Food, Wine, and Fete is the all-inclusive soca celebration. Soca is a huge part of my community as a Trinidadian woman who loves carnival. But again, kind of springboarding from media mixology, springboarding from Women of Impact, which is another satellite small dinner that I do every fall, and really finding that, okay, wait a minute, there's another gap in the market that I can fill and bringing people together to celebrate. But now really leaning on my Caribbean community that's here in South Florida that again often gets kind of underserved. And we concepted it in 2019 as a way to celebrate all of the Caribbean chefs that I literally have traveled around the Caribbean and here in South Florida, ate their amazing food. And I'm like, they're rarely at the big food and wine festivals for one reason or the next. I'm like, let me fill that gap, but do it the way that I want to do it. And I really kind of put something together. If I said if I could step out for one night and have an amazing time and eat delicious food, sip amazing cocktails, and get like a in an all-inclusive experience, what would that look and feel like? And that's what Food, Wine, and Fete is. It's pretty much a celebration of all things Caribbean and an incredible Soca Fete experience, which I love. And it's incredibly successful. Our second year back after our hiatus in 20, this is way past 30 seconds.
That's all right. Go, go.
In 2019 was our launch year, our inaugural. We took a break and brought it back this 2024 to a sold out 850 patrons and an all inclusive electric affair on the sands of historic Virginia Key Beach. It was really awesome. We ended it with a drone show. You missed the drone show.
I know, but here, we've got an image of it over here.
Oh,
It looks awesome. Look how packed it is
yay! It is.
on the sand, which I love. I
Yeah.
love the vibe. You got everything you would want in a great event, and people showed up, and the weather held out. I was a little
Yes.
worried about the weather.
It was a scorcher, Steve.
Yeah, it was very hot. I think it was
It
like the
was.
first
It
heat
was.
warnings of the season. And for listeners, if we're showing this on the YouTube channel, you can come and watch and see what it looks like. But you can always check it out online on her webpage as well.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to put on at a successful event.
Yeah.
People don't realize, like, oh, I'm just gonna say I'm having an event and 800 people will show up.
No.
I
And
wanted to
pay.
get
And
yes,
pay.
and
Right?
pay to go. And
Yeah.
it was a good value for the ticket, but
Yeah.
it's not a low price ticket,
Yeah.
right? Compared to some other things. But people came and you sold out. So
Yeah.
what was it? Give us a couple of the how-tos. Like, it's one thing to have an idea. A lot of people have ideas.
Sure.
How did you actually get this rolling?
I got it rolling because I did a lot of market research. I'm all about market research. I will fly to the island and research and see what it is like to stay in that fabulous all-inclusive five-star hotel and report back, right?
Yeah,
I will go to the Caribbean and experience all their carnivals and then report back, right?
it's tax deductible too, I think, right?
Exactly. And so that's so we did again about 15 years of research. When I say that, I mean going to other experiences and really seeing, okay, this is what's missing, and also building a lot of camaraderie along the way. So with chefs, with DJs, with artists, with musicians, so that when it was time for us to launch, it was easy to call on those people and go, hey, this is what I'm doing. We talked about this. I'm really doing it now. Are you in? Would you be willing to, support, and of course make sure that it was something that I could afford. And we created a blueprint and said, this is what we are wanting to do, and understanding this is what the city permits cost. Here's how far in advance you have to book this. First of all, you got to get your date. Then you got to, first of all, back it up, you got to get your trademark. Okay, get a
Ooh.
trademark. Whatever it
Yep.
is that you are going to spend all of this time until the wee hours of the morning, you wanna protect it. So first and foremost, protect the brand. So we purchased the website, purchased all that stuff, did our trademark. That trademark time took us time to get all of our ducks in a row because it took about a year because of the
Wow.
words food and wine. It took a little longer than most trademarks are between 6 and 9 months, right? So ours was about a year and a half before we got that trademark. And then once we got it back, we're like, okay, you know, let's go, Deion Sanders style, and we just did it. And so that came with finding a location and a date, right? To create this experience, and then building block like everything else. So again, sound, stage, permits, trusses, all the things, Steve, all the things. You're bringing back
Yes.
all that, all the
That's
emotions
scary.
of it. Yeah. And then, touching bases with chefs, touching bases with brands that I've worked with for the past 20 years and saying, "Hey, I'm doing this. Are you interested in this? Is this something that you like to tap into?" And then you again seeing what stuck. But what stuck was everyone that we called was like, "Yes, I'm in. I want to do it. Let's." So it was just really exciting to see that people understand that there's value in a person from the Caribbean having their own, being underserved and you being able to tap in and connect with them because they've got a lot of spending power.
Yeah, you created something for you is the other
Yeah,
part too, which
pretty
I love,
much.
right? I think you're
Yeah.
scratching your own itch, but
Yeah.
it's also, like I tell people too, like you have to front a lot of money and you got
Oh,
to make sure you're like, I have to pay a lot of people to show up and make sure
oh,
you
yeah.
get things.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because this is a big event, right? Like
Yeah.
you're doing a lot of things up front. Are you raising money? Are you paying this all on your own? Because that is, you know, a big time thing to do.
Yeah. So it's myself and my partner, Marcos. We both put in our own capital. We fronted our own capital. Now, we obviously knew that we needed to hit this benchmark of tickets to be able to
Get a
pay
break even.
ourselves back
Yep.
and break
Hmm.
even. That we did this year. But first year out, we didn't, right? So again, I was leaning on a lot of connections and especially in travel and spirits that I had made throughout the years that came that were like, okay, I want to see, but I don't have any dollars, but I'll barter, right? So I'll come and I'll do a big presentation, and there's so much value in that and those connections and bartering because again, it allows you to it's twofold. It allows them to see the value in the people, but it allows the people to see the value in the brand as well. So,
Yes.
yeah, it was a lot of front money, and we kept getting tapped by a lot of people that wanted to invest. And hey, are, are you in need of a venture capitalist? We're like, no. Like intuition wise, I just felt like this is something I can afford because I've been strategizing for a decade to make sure I have enough money to build things on my own. Obviously, within reason, not just throwing your whole savings in there, right? But
Yeah.
making sure that you have money to make to take those calculated risks and leaning on a lot of connections and travel and spirits and wine that I had built to be able to say, okay, I'm tapping in. Would you like to tap in with me? And let's do it. And so all those kind of collision points come together to bring Food, Wine, and Vet back to the market in 2024 because again it had been on a 4-year hiatus, so I had to kind of reintroduce everybody back to the brand again. That's why the social media is super, I won't say it's aggressive, but it's super, what's the word,
It's present.
active.
I saw it. I
Very
saw it.
present and very active, yeah, and even
Mhm.
in off season, like, we're not taking a break. It's definitely an event that's annual, sure, but it's also a 360 platform connecting people to the Caribbean that, can't go at the moment, but maybe they're like, "Okay, wait, I do wanna go to St. Martin and go to that chef's restaurant and go to the carnival and do things beyond sand and sea and hotel," right?
Yeah, and I love that you involved all Caribbean islands in
Yeah,
this, right? Like, you had everyone
absolutely,
involved. How did you build
absolutely.
those connections? How did that happen?
Well, a lot of press trips, and that kind of falls back on my editorial side of things too. A lot of press trips, a lot of inviting them to events like Media Mixology, inviting people like Ceci, like Linda from the Lowe's that are like, "What are you doing again?" Okay, because you know how to bring people together, Vanessa. So we want to tap into those people and just really having them see the value. For instance, for Ceci, when she was at Palace Resorts for quite some time, she understood the value because I would invite her to things. And so she's like, okay, I'll give you a trip to give away at the event, and there's so much value in that. So who doesn't want to go to Mexico to stay at a fabulous 5-star all-inclusive LeBlanc so again, though, so it kind of, comes together in layers like that, let's say.
I love it. So you're building those connections. You got everyone supporting. This year, like you said, break even, but I think that's a huge win because it
Yeah.
was an amazing event. It was covered everywhere. I saw you on Deco Drive. I was proud of you.
Thank
I
you.
love seeing that. And so, Do you have the date already set for next year? Is it like a date that you're locking in every year for around the same time?
We're doing around the same time. We're looking at late April, early May. No date yet because I want to make sure that there's a couple things in terms of Caribbean satellite events that we want to make sure that we can support that don't overlap. So we'll know
Mhm.
in the next couple of weeks, but we're definitely aiming at spring 2025,
I
late
like it.
April. Mhm.
Maybe not as hot, hopefully.
Maybe not as hot, and if I could give another tip to a business owner who's putting, like, events together like this, you definitely wanna make sure that you measure the marketplace to make sure that you're not overlapping with things. Not to say that you can't do something on, excuse me, having competing events in one weekend. But at the end of the day, if I'm doing something where I know my audience is going to be focused on other things, maybe not do that weekend. So we strategically stayed away from like F1 weekend.
Right.
It's a giant, it's a beast now, and it took them some time to get here. But F1 weekend, we stay away from Mother's Day, things where we know our audience is not going to be, focused. So making sure that you have as much as you can, right? Create something where it's something that they can't say no to. They want to go because they don't have any conflicts. And that's what I try to think about myself when I'm putting this together. I'm like, okay, I probably wouldn't want to go because of not just F1, but the traffic. Right.
Yes.
So again, it goes back to thinking about your patron. And that's really where I start and end everything in terms of really understanding who my customer is and making sure I'm super serving them.
What is the one thing that you looked at this year like, "All right, I'm gonna tweak that for next year." Is there something that sticks out, like, clearly?
Yeah, if I could tweak one thing, it would be the time just because it was so hot. So we are moving from a 3 o'clock start to a 5 o'clock start to kinda take the pressure off that heat, and we're going to transition to, 5 to 11, which I think is a really nice sweet spot. So
Nice.
definitely the timing of the event. Push it back just a little bit. It gives our staff also more time to recalibrate, take showers, and hydrate before it's
Mhm.
time to, like, welcome everyone. But probably just that, along with obviously more brands, more ice. And we had a lot of food left over. So we tapped into this charity net for families this year that we could donate a lot of things to. So probably just making sure that, there's better logistics to donate all the unused items to them. So things like that, small things.
No, those are little tweaks,
Yeah.
and I loved it, and I was really upset I had to miss it,
Oh,
but I will be there for sure next year. I
2025.
saw
Yeah.
you and Ceci and Linda and other people I knew dancing, and I was ready to be there, with
Oh.
my wife, so we'll be
Well,
there.
we gotta bring it then, Steve. You and your
I'm
wife, you
ready.
gotta bring it for the Turks.
I'm ready to go.
Okay.
So, now, we've talked about a lot of things here, but this show, The Hospitality Mentor, you gave us some great advice on a lot of things already,
Yeah.
but if young Vanessa was coming out of Florida State and was joining your team, what advice are you giving her today if she was starting out in this industry of entertainment?
Absolutely. Three pieces of advice. One, make sure that you are a person of your word. If you say you're going to do it because the people that you're going to be working with in this industry, when you are impeccable with your word, you will always be in demand. You will always be in demand. Follow up, follow through, and be a person of your word. Those would be my three. I think also it's really important to trust your gut in things because a lot of times back, when I was, let's say, 22, 23 years old, or even like 30, right? Where I was like really kind of starting to get into flow. I wish I would have trusted myself more as an entrepreneur, went for things, not sat on ideas, ran things by people because, I was insecure, worried about, oh my gosh, if I run this by them, are they going to steal this idea? Well, if you trademark it and you do what you need to do, then you don't have to worry about that, right? So at the end of the day, obviously protect your ideas, protect your intellectual property, but don't try to do things alone. Very important to run things past people and understanding that collective collaboration is so much better than doing it all by yourself. Hire people to do things, hire a PR person so you don't have to be pitching yourself. Hi, I'm doing this event, no. So understanding like what your strengths are probably would be my number one, and hiring people, that understand your vision to help you execute those strengths. And if you're a solo entrepreneur and maybe you don't have events and you're just, for instance, you're in hospitality and you're looking to, do something where it's you as the person, just make sure you have your ducks in a row in terms of making sure that you have your items trademarked again, and all of those things before you step out into the world, and understanding, okay, this is the vision for myself, but I know that I'm going to have to be malleable and have some flexibility in terms of how I get there. It's not a straight shot. There's going to be some exits, but then you can hop right back on if you're super connected to the vision.
Yeah, that's great advice. Advice that you gave me a lot of pointers today that I got to work on. One in particular that I wrote down here that I need to focus on, which I'll tell you off the air.
Oh, okay. I was waiting
I've got
for
to
it. We're
focus
like, "What
on it.
is it?"
I can't say because it might get me in trouble here. So I got
Okay,
to make sure I take care
okay.
of that one. But if somebody wants to connect with you, Vanessa, you've given us so much awesome info, and maybe somebody wants to reach out to you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Best way is tapping in via online at vanessajamesmedia.com across all platforms at Vanessa James Media, and of course on LinkedIn at
I
Vanessa
love
James.
it. And
Mhm.
now I got one last request.
Sure.
This is a request now. You don't have
Okay.
to say yes, but I need a Vanessa James sign off of the Hospitality Mentor episode today. Can you give me
Okay.
one?
Sure. Ooh, okay, let me hydrate. All right. Where is the Hospitality Mentor podcast available?
It is available on all streaming platforms and YouTube.
Okay. You're tuned in to the Hospitality Mentor with host Steve Turk. Catch us on all platforms, streaming platforms today, including Spotify, iHeart, and of course, Apple Podcasts and Google.
I love it. Listen to that voice. That's a professional. This voice here, trash. This voice there, professional. This is what I love. Well, Vanessa, it means a lot to me that you joined us all today. You shared so much great advice to all of us. I appreciate you being so open and very grateful you joined.
Of course, anytime.